Much of Britain is warned of very high levels of air pollution triggered by a huge dust cloud from the Sahara. This is how the pollution looks across central London, and it's been smoggy across large areas of the country. With readings in some parts of the UK at maximum levels, people with heart and lung problems or asthma are warned to be careful. This is a Sky News special report, Pollution Warning.
The sand has come from the Sahara Desert over in North Africa. Desert storms lifted the particles into the air, and as these images show, they were carried for thousands of miles, picking up dust particles and pollution along the way. The dust cloud travelled across the Mediterranean Sea and parts of Europe before sweeping into England and Wales. The sand was then deposited by rain showers. Many people woke up to find their cars and homes covered in these particles. And these aerial images show just how thick the smog was this morning. The pictures were taken in London. Some of the famous landmarks are barely visible. The view from the Shard not quite as spectacular this morning either. But while it may be a novelty to have so much sand in our atmosphere, these storms are not uncommon. Particles from the Sahara are deposited in the Amazon rainforest every year, and this is where they're really needed. The soil of the Amazon is drained of nutrients by heavy downpours, so the sand from the Sahara brings extra minerals to keep it fertile. Back here in the UK, experts say the sand alone won't cause problems. It's our pollution levels that are more of a concern.
It's a relatively unusual combination of events that actually individually in themselves aren't that unusual. So first of all, we've had the Saharan dust storm. Then secondly, that's been combined with relatively light but southerly winds, bringing the dust over continental Europe, picking up pollution from Europe. And so what we have reaching the UK is this combination of things. And then we have high pressure, which acts, if you like, as a lid on the atmosphere, traps the pollution and stops it dispersing. So it's that combination of things which is somewhat unusual, perhaps occurring every 5 years or so.
So, how bad is today's pollution? Well, DEFRA, the government's environment department, has a 10-point scale to measure air quality. 1 signifies low risk and 10 means very high pollution levels. Their forecasts see parts of Norfolk reaching level 10 today, with a reading of 8 or 9 in other areas of central and southern England. It'll start to clear up slightly tomorrow, when the Midlands will be the worst affected area with high levels of pollution. And by Friday, a change in wind direction means pollution levels should return back to normal.
Well, I have with me the GP, Dr. Ellie Cannon. Ellie, tell me, how serious an issue is this for people out there today?
It shouldn't be a serious issue for people who are otherwise healthy. The concern is for people who have underlying respiratory or heart disease.
And tell me, if you do have respiratory problems or heart issues or lung disease, what should you be doing in these kind of situations?
If you do have asthma or COPD or heart disease, it's advisable not to go out unless it is necessary. And if you do have to go out, to take your inhalers or your medication with you.
So if we see these kind of levels over a prolonged period, this could be a serious issue for a lot of people.
Yeah, we know from worldwide data that long-term exposure to particle air pollution can be a problem. It increases your risk of respiratory infections and also longer-term respiratory and heart disease.
Dr. Ellie Cannon, thanks for your time. Of course, air pollution is not a new thing in the UK and beyond. It's been going on for decades. Take a look at these pictures of London in 1952. A mixture of low pressure and gases from coal being burned to heat homes and power factories led to huge amounts of smog over the capital. And this was how some Londoners coped back then. Of course, other cities get it too. This was Paris recently, when its air pollution exceeded safe levels for 5 days in a row. The French government decided to impose traffic restrictions, allowing motorists to drive only on alternate days, depending on the registration number of their vehicle. Some places are very accustomed to the desert sands encroaching on people's lives. Unsurprisingly, Dubai, where it's a regular occurrence. And in both Moscow and Beijing, air pollution is a problem that blights those cities on a regular basis.
Muscovites can breathe easy today. Air quality is good. Pollution levels have fallen thanks to strong winds taking particles away from the city. But Moscow does have significant problems. With a population of over 12 million people, space here is at a premium, and nowhere more so than on the roads. Car ownership here has burgeoned over the last decade, and vehicles are now the biggest producers of pollution in this city. In fact, right across Russia, pollution from cars has grown dramatically, just as pollution from heavy industry has fallen in the decades since the breakup of the Soviet Union. The dirtiest city, Norilsk in Siberia, it's no coincidence that it's the world's biggest producer of nickel. Other big contributors are the vast factories which pump out heat for this incredibly cold climate. Now, on days when emissions are, or pollution is considered to be a threat to public health, the government does ask those power plants, to curtail their emissions. But during an incredibly cold winter, they can't simply flick the off switch.
Well, this is the traditional way to get around the Chinese capital, Beijing, on a bike. Today, it's pretty good. It's certainly quicker, and it's safe today because the air pollution isn't too bad. But on most days, you simply couldn't do this without wearing a hefty face mask because the air pollution levels are so bad. And here's part of the problem. You can see the traffic here. This is just one street in Beijing. It's clogged. The cars use low quality fuel. Beijing is in a bowl. All of that mixes together with the coal power stations, and it's a really, really horrible mix. You can taste it on certain days. Over the past couple of years, the Chinese government has made a relatively controversial decision. They've decided to publish the figures for just how bad the air is here, and it's really frightening reading. The safe level, according to the World Health Organization, is a figure of 25. But on an average day here, it's way, way above that. Right now, it's at 100. And back in January last year, it hit 700. Don't forget the safe level, 25. In January 2013, it was 700.
Now, our reporters have been out and about across the country today monitoring air pollution levels. We can take a look now at how they got on.
Well, I'm in a place called Dunstable Down, which is very, very, very high up. And the view behind me, which you can see, is quite spectacular. I'm just going to get Paul to focus on one of those villages behind me. That is the village of Tottenhoe. Now, you can see that quite clearly, but beyond it, it's very restricted. And locals tell me that on a clear day, you can actually see the entire horizon, and that it's not normally so foggy and smoggy here. One local told me that the dust had actually reached her backyard and it was covering her car. We were in Luton earlier today, just up the road from here, and we also saw evidence of cars parked up along the roads with that dust layer on top of the cars. Now, for places like Luton, it is quite worrying because last year the Department of Health released figures which showed that 6.43% of all deaths in Luton are attributable to air pollution. So that, combined with these latest warnings, is of great concern to locals.
Well, pollution levels are expected to be very high today. Now, the DEFRA scale goes from 1 to 10, 10 being the worst, and we are expected to see that today, although we know that it's registered at 3 from around 10 o'clock this morning. And what we've seen this morning is a real haze just sat over the town and the surrounding area until around midday when it finally burnt off. And what is causing this air pollution? Well, it's a mixture of things according to DEFRA. Local emissions from things like cars, light winds, pollution coming over from the continent, and that Sahara sand which is being blown 2,000 miles north and hitting parts of the UK. It's being combined with that warm air and then deposited by rain onto things like cars, for example. And that's what we've seen today here at that car wash behind me. A steady stream of cars with dust on, brown dust it has to be said, not the red dust that we've heard about. Some people saying, you know, their car's just generally dirty, but others really do think that it is the Sahara sand that has suddenly deposited itself on their cars.
We've come up here so as we can get an idea of just how these pollution levels are affecting visibility, not just an impact upon people's health, but also, you can probably see from the scene behind me, if I just get out of the way, this is central London just behind me. Normally you'd be able to pick out various landmarks on the London skyline. You should be able to see the dome of St Paul's Cathedral from up here, but it's all obscured today. Very smoggy out there at the moment, and certainly while we've been up here over the last hour or so, certain landmarks, certain buildings that we were able to make out before, we can no longer see because of the smoggy conditions that we've got today. So that would certainly seem to suggest to me that the pollution levels aren't getting any better at the moment.
The World Health Organization says that 7 million deaths around the globe each year are linked to air pollution, mostly from heart and lung diseases. Levels are expected to drop back to normal by Friday, but this latest episode will draw attention to the government's failure to tackle the issue long term. After 15 years of failing to reduce air pollution levels in the UK, the European Union has finally run out of patience and started legal proceedings against Britain for failing to reduce nitrogen dioxide levels. This has been a Sky News special report, Pollution Warning.